The Thing That Watched Me. Episode 1. I moved into that apartment because it was the only place I could afford on short notice. The building looked old, but not creepy, just tired. The kind of place where the walls hold decades of stories you'll never hear. After dragging in my boxes and tossing them randomly across the living room, I sat on the couch and let out a long breath. The evening outside was quiet, strangely quiet for a city street. I remember thinking it felt almost paused. My window faced the street, giving me a view of a flickering streetlight and a row of small houses across the road. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I wasn't even paying attention. My mind was on work, unpacking, what I'd cook for dinner. But then I felt it, that weird sensation, like someone is watching you even though you're alone. My eyes drifted toward the window, and that's when I saw him. A man standing across the street, directly under the flickering street lamp, not walking, not shifting, not doing anything, just standing perfectly still. His body angled toward my window as if he had been waiting for me to look at him. At first, I assumed he was just resting or checking his phone, but he wasn't holding anything. His arms hung too straight, too stiff. He looked like a figure someone placed there, not a living person. Something in my chest tightened, a slow, creeping realization that I couldn't immediately explain. He wasn't just standing there. He was watching me. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to understand what I was seeing. The streetlight flickered again, making his silhouette jump unevenly across the pavement. But he didn't react. Not even a twitch. No smoke from a cigarette. No shifting weight from one foot to the other. No movement of the hands. Just stillness. Unnatural stillness. I looked around the street to see if anyone else noticed him. A woman walked her dog across the block, but neither she nor the dog reacted. A car drove past slowly, but the driver didn't glance at him either. It was like I was the only one who could see him. I stood up, walked closer to the window, and pressed my forehead gently against the glass. The stranger didn't move, didn't tilt his head, didn't step back. His presence felt so wrong, so deliberate, that a shiver ran all the way down my spine. The worst part? He was facing directly toward my window. Not the building. Not the street. Me. I pulled back, suddenly overwhelmed with a sharp, cold fear I couldn't explain. I kept telling myself, he's just some guy. Maybe he's waiting for someone. Maybe he's drunk. But deep down, something whispered, "No, he's here for you." I turned off the lights in my apartment, hoping the darkness would make him less visible. But even in the dark, his silhouette remained sharply outlined beneath the flickering light. He didn't fade. He didn't blur. He didn't disappear into the shadows. The darkness only made him look more intentional. I closed the curtains quickly, almost aggressively, trying to push the fear down with my hands. I kept telling myself not to be dramatic, not to let my imagination run. But as I walked away from the window, I still felt the weight of his stare pressing through the curtains. When I finally peeked outside at dawn, he was gone, no trace of him. No footprints. No sign that anyone ever stood there at all. I tried to forget about it. I pretended it was nothing, but the fear didn't leave. The next night, he returned, same place. Same rigid pose, same motionless outline under the street lamp. And the night after that, every evening around the same time, just before midnight, he appeared like clockwork. Sometimes I checked immediately, sometimes hours later, but he was always there, in that exact spot. The consistency made it worse. People don't act like this. They don't stand completely still for hours. They don't stare at the same window every night. By the end of the week, I avoided looking outside. Even closing the curtains took effort. My hands trembled every time. I reached for the fabric. But the knowledge that he was out there, in that exact spot, burrowed deeper into my brain. Something was building. Something was leading up to something else. And I knew, absolutely knew, that ignoring him wouldn't make him go away. Friday night, everything changed. I came home late, exhausted, wanting nothing more than to collapse into bed. But habit forced me to check the window, just for a second, just enough to know he was still there. But when I looked, he wasn't in his usual place. For a moment, relief washed over me. Maybe he finally moved on. Maybe he was just a strange man with strange habits, and Then I noticed the shadow. Not at the streetlight, not across the road, directly below my window. He had moved closer. Much closer. My heart thudded so loudly I could hear it echoing in my ears. I leaned forward, teeth clenched, barely breathing. He stood perfectly still again. The same posture. The same angled head, Manon. But now I could see him so much clearer. The hoodie covered most of his face, but not all of it. And what I could see didn't look right. His chin was sharp, almost pointed, like it didn't belong to a human face. His neck seemed too thin, stretched unnaturally under the hood. And his head? The tilt wasn't natural. It was far too sharp, like his neck couldn't support the weight. He stood there for hours. This time I didn't have the strength to pretend it was normal. My fear wrapped around me so tightly I could barely move. The next morning, after hours of pacing the apartment, trying to calm my shaking hands, I finally convinced myself to call the police. Not because I thought they would solve anything, but because I needed someone else to confirm. I wasn't losing my mind. 2 officers showed up around noon. One was tall and tired-looking, the other young and overly cheerful. They stepped into my apartment, glanced around, and asked me to explain. I told them everything. How the man kept appearing every night. How he never moved. How he somehow managed to get closer, without anyone seeing him walk. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked more than once. The older officer nodded politely, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. The younger one kept checking his phone like he was bored. Okay, the older one sighed. Show us where he stands. I led them to the window. We looked outside together. The older officer squinted. Right there, you said? Under that street lamp? I nodded. He shrugged. There's no one here now. I pressed my palm against the glass, frustration rising. I know he only comes at night, but he stands in the same place every single time. The officers exchanged a look, the kind that says we're dealing with someone stressed out, not someone in danger. The officers left after filling out a basic report. The older one gave me a sympathetic smile. If you see him again, call us, but try not to stress. Night shadows can play tricks on the eyes. I wanted to scream. It wasn't a shadow, and my eyes weren't playing tricks. And that night, I would get proof. I tried to go to bed early, hoping sleep would come before fear. But sleep didn't come. My mind replayed the officer's words again and again. Shadows. Tricks of the eye. Footprints. By midnight, I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling. The air in the room felt heavy, like a storm was gathering even though the night outside was calm. At 2 a.m., it happened. 3 slow, distinct taps on my window. Tap! 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 My heart jumped into my throat. I froze, listening. Tap! 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 The same rhythm. Slow, deliberate, patient. I forced myself to sit up. Every instinct screamed not to move, not to look, not to breathe. But I needed to know. I grabbed my phone, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped it, and opened the camera to use as a mirror. I lifted it toward the window, staring only at the screen. Nobody. This is the end of the first episode. Comment next for the continuation. Subscribe to the English Listening Stories channel to be disciplined in learning English.